Welcome back to the broadcast. This is Inside Politics here on KTN News. The country's top leadership congregated at the Kabarak home of former President, the late Daniel Arap Moi, during his first memorial. President Uhuru Kenyatta was among the people who attended the ceremony, warned against what he described as arrogance being exhibited by a section of politicians, saying it was a threat to peace and stability. Other political leaders urged the head of state to put his Jubilee House in order by taming his deputy president. KTN senior political reporter Patrick Amimo was there.
Family and friends gathered at Kabarak for the first anniversary to reflect on the life and times of Kenya's second and long-serving president, Daniel Moi. President Uhuru Kenyatta was among other political leaders that graced the occasion. The current high-octane politics was an issue worrying the president.
The arrogance that we see in today's leadership raises many questions as to the future of this country.
And with 17 months to the general election, Uhuru cautioned Kenyans to beware that choices they make have consequences.
Wenzangu, tusiteleze, tulete demolition squad badala ya wajenzi.
Party leaders Mombasa Mudavadi and Kalonzo asked the president to put his house Jubilee in order.
Na captain, hata kwa mpira, ukiona watu wengine wanacheza, badala ya kufunga kule, wanarudi kufunga upande wako. Waweke kwa wanaweka nini? Kwa bench, rudisha mtu kwa bench.
You cannot afford to antagonize your people and create class wars and radicalize the youth. Yani una radicalize wengine kiasi kwamba kijana kama Osoro anatoka kwa matanga. Mheshimiwa amechaguliwa na kura. Anamshambulia mwenzake akiwa kwa jukwaa na hapa kuna jeneza.
Hii siasa ingine, Your Excellency. Nafikiri wewe umekuwa mtu wa accommodate views ya kila moja. Lakini imetosha, Your Excellency. Utoe kiboko sasa.
The political class was urged to emulate the late Moi by preaching messages of peace, love and unity.
Let us not allow the introduction of divisive politics, where instead of you telling us how we can all live together, we now come and say it is this versus this. And that is the end of a country, I can assure you.
Babu hiyo nafasi inapeanwa na Mwenyezi Mungu kupitia wananchi wa Jamhuri ya Kenya. Kwa hivyo hata ukitukana nani namna gani, hata ukifanya nini kwa nani, hata ukiwa na hasira ya aina gani, hiyo haitasaidia.
With the high-octane politics triggered by the BBI process and succession politics, will political leadership heed advice to stop divisive politics and preach unity? Patrick Amimo, KTN News, Kabarak, Nakuru County.
Hezbon Owila, let me begin with you this time. What are you reading from this? We are seeing all these political figureheads, the party leaders, all of them, going up against the DP and wanting his boss to tame him.
Well, I think it says a lot about the president, that there is a lot of intent and demonstration of that intent by the president to unite this country and just focus on developing this country and uniting Kenyans. Going by the sentiments from all these leaders, and I've interacted with so many constitutional scholars, media scholars, people who have interrogated both the Jubilee Constitution and the Constitution of Kenya 2010, and they say that there is enough ground to deal decisively with this issue of, a deputy president who is speaking, in a manner that is likely to suggest that he is not deputizing the president and is contravening the Constitution. But I think the spirit of constitutionalism and uniting this country pays a lot of credence to the public interests of Kenyans. And to a large extent, no one would want a situation where, rather than focus on development, you're focusing on sideshows. Having a title and a position, even if it causes rancor among other political leaders who feel that the president needs to do something, is not as important as uniting this country and developing this country. As a matter of fact, we have slightly more than 14 months to the next general election. The deputy president can do the best that he can do to deputize the president, but I think the president is a lot more focused on uniting this country and developing this country. And the best thing to do right now is to make the best out of this situation. Kenyans ultimately will have a judgment, and a call to make in the coming election.
All right.
Did the people that they gave the power deliver? And who was responsible for what? And I think that is where the call for what happens to the deputy president will be made.
Javas, 8 years ago, we coined this phrase, Ruto, speaking to the joint nature of the presidency and the presidential ticket in the 2010 Constitution. According to what you understand, what are these political leaders asking for the president to do exactly?
Well, first, it is obvious that the subsistence of that political marriage, fabled or named, branded, baptized as Ruto, has come to naught. To steal a line from the poet of yore, W.B. Yeats, I would say, and I quote, "Turning and turning the wedding gyre, things fall apart. In Jubilee, things have long fallen apart." And when you listen keenly and interpret the message that came from Kabarak during the memorial of former President Moi, then you would realize that it was an alliance of voices against the deputy president by way of the politics of the day and the interests that are on the table. The calls to have the deputy president put on the bench, I think, are interesting, but they are just political.
All right.
Because when you look at the provisions of the Constitution and the grounds for which a deputy president could be removed from office, when you also look at the oath that was taken, oath of office that was taken by the president and the deputy president, and here, when you look at the oath of the deputy president, it's quite clear that all of them, the two gentlemen, realizing the high calling of serving this republic and Kenyans, the deputy president has the honors upon him to give advice to the president as his principal assistant whenever required. It therefore seems to me that the advice and counsel of the deputy president has perpetually been unrequired, especially in this second term. And if at all we have to live within the elements of the rule of law and provisions of the removal of office of the deputy president, then I think it will be very difficult to have that threshold of removing the deputy president from office. All this is politics. But I think it's also proper that these two gentlemen, the president and the deputy president, they should demonstrate to this country what actually sobriety of leadership and service is, both of them. Because when they served together, when they took oath and willingly served together politically, it was for the best interests of this country. Yes, it is true that now their political horizons are very different, but that does not mean that the nation and its citizens should suffer for it.
Right.
So both men, I think, should have their ambitions, especially the deputy president, his ambitions tempered by rationality, but also the president to be a man in charge, not necessarily by breeding more divisions within his own Jubilee party. Because look at it in retrospect. The government under Jomo Kenyatta, the government under Daniel Toroitich arap Moi, I never had any politician direct or advise the president at that time to put his own house in order. During Mwai Kibaki's time, there was limited, if any, advice and guidance to the president to put his own house in order. When a man is told by neighbors and strangers to put his own house in order, then actually the focus should then be on that man.
All right.
Now the president has got it upon his own house to put Jubilee in order, his own house.
And we've heard that quite a few times in different public platforms being told that. Let's take this to the next level. What benching or taming the deputy president means, a lot of people seem to think that it is an impeachment motion. The Sunday Standard is reporting of a fresh impetus, an impending motion against the deputy president, saying that the ODM members of parliament have given their party leader, Raila Odinga, an ultimatum or their set of demands for them to support an impeachment motion against the deputy president. Very quickly, the motion must be sponsored by Jubilee Party and have the full blessings of the president. Then Amani National Congress Deputy Party Leader Ayub Savula, the current sponsor of such a motion, should not be the face of impeachment. That is another of their demands. Foolproof plan that it will not collapse and leave egg on their faces, on their collective face. And rejected proposal for formation of a committee to spearhead motion, as they do not know who is backing that. And finally, that the Odinga comes back to them with answers before they embark on supporting removal of the deputy president. Dismas Mokua, is it possible to impeach the DP? And is there justification?
Well, let's go back to the basics, Ben. There are political ambitions of elected leaders. When they're not consistent with our public and national interest, they're a threat to our national security. Well captured in Article 238 of the Kenyan Constitution, that if these ambitions are the cause of political instability and economic stagnation, then that is an actual threat to political stability. It's a threat to our economic growth, and that is unacceptable. Then number two, the probability of impeaching the deputy president to stand today is fast approaching zero, because it's going to require a lot of work. And we know that our members of the National Assembly and Senate in Kenya stand accused by both outsiders and insiders of having conversations around khaki envelopes anywhere within the, the precincts of the National Assembly and Senate. So there's a very high chance that monetary issues may come in and compromise that position. And on this matter that was brought up by ANC, you see ODM wants to take advantage of that situation by setting up a list of demands. While in fact they know that Ayub Savula has already come up with this idea, why can't ODM give Savula and company unlimited support to make this a success? Now, the cumulative effect of this, there's a group of constitutional scholars who are coming up with a very interesting perspective. That maybe in future, the person who becomes the running mate should probably be older than the presidential candidate, so that you don't have them having all these political ambitions. A panelist here has mentioned the case of Mwai Kibaki. You had Moody Awori as the vice president, and he didn't have any political ambitions of becoming a president. But somebody can easily say, what happened with Joe Biden? When Joe Biden was the deputy president of, vice president to Obama, yes, he did not have a political interest. He said, I'm going to stay focused with Barack Obama, assist him achieve his legacies, then I go home. It's only after Trump came to office, then he went back and they said, wait a minute, I'm going to run to save America from Trump. And he's managed to do this. Now, when you have the deputy president and the president of the Republic of Kenya pulling in two different directions, the president saying, let's work on my legacy for 10 years, and the deputy president saying, wait a minute, I don't care about this legacy, I want to be the president in 2022. Right. Now, those two are pulling in two different directions, and in my view, there's no better threat to our national security than the president and his deputy pulling in two different directions. Because as a result of this, you've seen political instability and you've seen economic stagnation. Those two have got very serious political capital, that if they were pulling in the same direction, we would not be having this conversation. And have you asked yourself, why can't Kenya as a nation mature, that if elections are going to be August next year, why can't campaigns begin in March?
It's a good question. I don't know who should answer that. But Mark Bichache, is the DP going to be impeached? Is it possible to do that?
Well, technically it is possible. Practically it is quite difficult to pull off. But here's the basis upon which we need to consider the moral question and the morality of this dilemma we find ourselves in. The role of any deputy, Ben, is to deputize, which basically means to support the agenda of whoever is head of state. Now, you can imagine if your cameraman thinks that the camera should face a completely different angle. He's supposed to assist you, but every time he may have the best shot of probably the back of Dismas's head, and it's the most beautiful shot, but you as head of the show, that is not the shot that you want. And this is literally what we are seeing with the deputy president. And I know people say that there's responsibility on both sides. But I think not, because I think that we need to think about this presidency question beyond the confines of Uhuru and Ruto as individuals. Because my question to myself is, are we setting up a precedence where the deputy to the next president can flip the bird on the sitting president to no consequence? Who should condescend to who? When you deputize someone and you disagree with them, don't the rules of cabinet dictate that there's collective responsibility? When William Ruto sits in cabinet and then the next day declares that the same cabinet he sits in has failed in the big four, shouldn't it be a moral question for him to resign? These are the questions we must answer, and it is not a question about William Ruto. It is a question about the presidency of a republic called Kenya. Let us look at Mike Pence. When people were shouting for him to be hung, did he betray his role as deputy to the presidency of the United States? No, he did not. Yet we sit here where we've got a deputy who is actively in opposition politics, opposes everything the president says, and I'm telling you, if Uhuru Kenyatta woke up tomorrow and said the sun rises from the east, I'm telling you, Tanga would object vehemently. It's the same thing that I find weird, Ben, that a deputy president can sit and be present when Sonko is insulting his boss. These are the things we must ask ourselves. Is this the new normal?
All right, let me ask you this same thing, Mark Wichache. The deputy president, or there's a school of thought that has been saying that what we saw in Kabarak and the calls for the president to tame his deputy, that this is all political, that they just want to eliminate their political opponents.
Well, there are two things to say to that, and they're both true. Number one, that yes, if I was Mombasa Mudavadi and I consider William Ruto a threat, I would want him out of the race. That is normal politics. But number two, if I was Mudavadi, if I was Kalonzo, if I was Gideon, in fact, if I was Uhuru Kenyatta, looking 20 years down the line, do I want a country where the deputy president can wake up and walk in a completely different direction from the rest of cabinet, and it is normal? This is the main issue. The politicians will keep saying the political things, but the question we must ask ourselves as a country is, imagine if your wife, every time you went to a function, you said as a family we are contributing 10,000 shillings to this Arambe, and your wife wakes up and says, ever since my husband had a handshake, now we are not contributing 10,000, we are going to contribute negative 10,000. A house divided against itself cannot stand. This is just the fact. And it's the role of anyone who's a deputy to support his boss. After all, what is Uhuru doing that is evil? BBI, Big Four, fight against corruption. What is this six-headed hydra demon that the president is doing that the deputy must oppose? The truth is, the opposition is not about BBI. The opposition is about selfish greed and ambition to get power at whatever level.
I have to say, Mark, though, the point of departure is also that it's very hard to differentiate between BBI and 2022 politics. You have to agree that. But Hesbon Owila, how does the president solve this endorsement riddle?
Well, I think it's a tight spot that the president finds himself in, because on the one hand, the reason why we had the handshake and the consequent BBI and the amendment bill that we have right now is because we wanted a country that can be governed and the development agenda by the Jubilee attended to. And to that extent, peace was very significant. Now, for these individuals who are calling for the president to crack the whip, I mean, a lot of it should be looked at from a political point of view. They are looking at eliminating a direct opponent who is fairly powerful as we race towards 2022. But the consequence of doing that would do a great disservice to this country. I mean, it would take us to the volatile situation that we had before the handshake. And from where I sit, the president does not have to heed to calls of people who also have interests. The president only needs to serve the interest of Kenyans. And the interest of Kenya as it is right now cannot be compromised by individuals who are saying that what the president is doing is against what they agreed, yet Kenyans are seeing that whatever the president is doing is working for Kenyans. There's no problem in uniting Kenyans. There's no problem in pushing the Big Four agenda. But there's a problem with politicians who have a problem with a president who is uniting Kenyans. There's a problem with politicians who have a problem with a president who is delivering on his promises. And from what I said, it is for Kenyans to judge these politicians. It is not for politicians who have ambitions to tell the president what to do or what not to do. The consequence of anyone who is frustrating the interest of Kenyans will be attended to on the ballot.
Javas, on the 9th of August next year, Kenyans will be going to the polls to elect their next set of leaders. That is more than 17 months away. The current crop of leaders have shown that they are unable to draw a line between BBI and a potential referendum and 2022 politics. How does the president navigate that with being told he needs to endorse somebody? The DP has been saying that the party leaders, Kalonzo, Musalia Mudavadi, should stop begging for endorsements and go out there to rally their voters.
Well, of course, when you look at the politics and the personality of Deputy President William Ruto, he is exceptionally shrewd, strategic, and a master tactician compared to Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka and Honorable Musalia Mudavadi. Of course, if at all political woes would befall Deputy President and the shadow of darkness cast upon him, it would thrill the spirits of Kalonzo Musyoka and Musalia Mudavadi, basically because now their erstwhile opponent would be at the doldrums. And of course, that we know that for political reasons. For President Uhuru Kenyatta, you see, he is in a very funny spot because here is a man who knows that these tassels that are there are basically predicated on the inheritance of the political mantle from him. And yet this man is not seen as part of the people who should be in that promised land of inheritance. And so here he finds himself steadily determined to deliver his mandate until the close of time. And then all these voices that are heralding and, of course, positioning themselves for that inheritance. So the BBI basically is going to be that air, that buoyancy upon which some politicians, here Kalonzo Musyoka, here Musalia Mudavadi, and even Raila Odinga himself, want to use for purposes of jettisoning into the successes of the 2022 general election.
All right.
And the same thing, Deputy President William Ruto wants to use this BBI politics as well to position himself and see what is it that the heavenly dwellers may position for his luck, whether his side will carry the day and therefore with it orchestrate a possible success at the ballot, or whether it's the other side of Raila Odinga and team, whether the buoyancy of the BBI, if it becomes successful, will also orchestrate his desired success. Right. And that is what is informing the kind of cutthroat competition that is on the political scene at present.
All right. This must have the final word on this. This endorsement seems to be a real puzzle. Raila Odinga, the ODM party leader, seems to have put all his eggs on the BBI basket. It seems like it's do or die for him. I'm not sure whether he wants that endorsement. I don't know what you think. The deputy president on his part on the campaign trail is saying that he does not, that the president does not owe him anything, that it's like he doesn't need the endorsement. It's like he's using that to get to the voters. Kalonzo Musyoka, Musalia Mudavadi, Moses Wetangula, and Gideon Moi on the other hand. How should they treat this endorsement? Mudavadi has said that he's his own man. He doesn't need the president's endorsement. What does President Uhuru Kenyatta do with this endorsement thing?
As he approaches his exit, President Kenyatta must look at our national and public interests and what works best for the nation. And believe you me, it would be naive for us to imagine that President Kenyatta doesn't have a preferred candidate. Of course, every president leaving office has got a preferred candidate. In other countries, they choose to be very explicit, and others, they choose to be very implicit. So in my view, what President Kenyatta needs to do is, having identified whoever he wants to succeed him, then now they can have a structured conversation and find out, is it going to be implicit, is it going to be explicit? And if it's going to be in the public domain, how does it affect the candidature? But still, the elephant in the room that President Kenyatta has not sorted out, and people are waiting eagerly to see how he manages it, and it's partially captured in BBI, is IEBC. So that IEBC is structured in a manner that when Mura goes to cast a ballot, the vote counts. That is the elephant in the room, and the president needs to come out and pronounce himself in a manner that assures Kenyans that their ballots are going to count. And for some reason, Kenyans, we've developed a very high appetite for firefighting. Now, we've got 18 months to the general election, but there is nobody among these key political players who is talking about restructuring IBC, so that we've got predictable systems for unpredictable outcomes. All of them are in deep slumber, including the president and his deputy, as well as Raila Odinga. And then Easter of next year, they'll be running all over town like madmen, asking themselves, how do we sort out IBC? We need to sort out IBC today. And you know, all these reports which were done after the 2007 post-election violence pointed to the fact that Kenya needs to have a very solid IBC. And in my view, that is the one thing that the president must do.
All right. Let's take a quick commercial break here on Inside Politics. Thank you for staying with us. When we come back, we'll talk about the issue of political intolerance. So many balls up in the air. There was drama in Matungu yesterday when there was some chaos in a burial ceremony. In Kisii, we saw on Monday when two sitting MPs took to each other's throats from the opposing sides of the political divide. We are seeing Suna East Member of Parliament, Hesbon Owila's MP, being roughed up by Kenyans online for his remarks of nominated Senator Isaac Mwaura and people living with albinism. We'll talk about all that and what the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, NCIC, wants to do about it as we go into the electioneering period. Stay with us.